brambles, roots, and ancient woodland, seizing away any kind of long-distance visibility in this so-called green desert. The going is tough, even by the notoriously treacherous standards of the New World. As a large team of Spanish conquistadors and their native servants hack away at the wilderness. Through brambles and razor leaves they go, pushing on through to the deep forest beyond. In Nahuatl, the language of many of the expedition porters, the name itself means place of many trees. The year is 1576, and just 50 years or so after the initial arrival of Europeans in this part of the world, the Yucatan Peninsula and its southern highland areas are still largely unexplored and unmapped. This isn't just enemy territory. It's unknown to Europeans entirely. And like all places at the edge of the map, here be monsters. In that year, Diego Garcia de Palacio, a determined soldier and magistrate in the governing council of the colonial state of Guatemala, has decided to make yet another foray into the unknown. Conquest and glory very much on his mind. Acting on orders from King Philip II of Spain, Palacio's mission was to inspect and catalogue the conquered provinces, embarking on a grand tour in order to do so. No stranger to the miserable deaths of comrades from both violence and bouts of malaria. The as yet then still mysterious scourge of Central America for centuries to come. Palacio must have had an iron constitution to not succumb during his lengthy journey. Besides his role as conqueror, he was an educated man. Born in around 1530 in Asturias, northern Spain, his interests included science and, above all else, sailing and navigation. His personal ambitions ranged far and wide. But above all else, he held a grand vision for expansion of the already mighty Spanish Empire. For Palacio, Honduras was to be the key. Uniquely placed between the colossal Atlantic Armada and the ever-growing Pacific Fleet. If he could achieve a means of crossing the isthmus of land there, then the sought-after governorship of the Philippines would surely be his. And with it, as many ships as he could muster for the exploration and conquest of yet more lands.
What is this?
But for all of Palacio's lofty ideals, to the indigenous inhabitants of the lands he travelled through, living in small villages scattered throughout the forest, forced to submit to foreign rule from beyond the sea. The Spaniard
Yo, Baron,
and his
what's up,
men
bro?
were
That's
simply
sick.
the latest in
Such
a long
sick color.
line
Thanks,
of
man. What's up, man?
warriors to trespass
What's up, dude?
in the land of trees.
How you doing, broski?
Then, one day,
In
just
Toski.
over the modern-day
Yes.
border of Guatemala
Yes.
and Honduras,
Yes. Yes,
everything
Baron.
changed.
Tell me your woes. Tell me. Open your heart.
Amidst the gnarled trunks and thickets,
What's up, bro? How you doing, man?
one of the men
Intoxicated,
spied
nice.
something else jutting
sick.
from the forest floor.
You should drink water, man.
Within minutes,
Especially on a hot
they were
day.
all seeing it. Stone structures, unmistakably carved by human hands. Elaborate buildings, crafted with snarling, beastly idols.
Oh, come on. Whatever.
Confident.
It's gonna rain for a
mocking
week? No
in their
way.
gaze.
Yeah, it's gonna rain here starting tomorrow.
And besides,
A week?
great
Really?
towering
Wow, that's insane.
structures and
It was
mounds
nice here the last few
coated
days.
in dense foliage, as
That
tall
sucks.
as the sky.
It's all good.
The
Stay
men
inside, smoke
could
the
only
weed.
stare on in awe at what they were seeing. Perhaps
It does suck,
feeling
though.
they'd caught a glimpse of something they shouldn't. Hieronymus Bosch painting in the flesh.
Past 2 days, not gonna end until next week. Last few days, yeah. I hear you.
What were these labyrinthine structures? Of a size and sophistication to match anything in the old world. Adorned with hideous, powerful symbols.
So fast. Come
More
on.
ominously,
Please. Please be the
who
run. Like,
had
please.
built them. Though Palacio was surely familiar with the reports from earlier on in the century of the towns and cities destroyed by the initial conquests, his predecessors often building their own settlements directly on top of those that came before, like the Yucatec colonial capital of Merida and the Mexican capital far to the north. New cathedrals etched from the stone of pagan temples and pyramids. Surely they had paled in comparison to this place. As was the custom of the day, Palacio wrote a lengthy description of his entire journey across the provinces that was then dispatched to the king back in Europe.
I see Hunter Biden pled guilty.
And at the end of that account, dated 8th of March 1576, he wrote an 850-word description of those mighty ruins in the forest.
Here was formerly the seat of a great power, and a great population,
Oh, dang.
civilized,
Fake. Oh,
and
dang.
considerably advanced in the arts, as
You
is
think it was
shown in
fake?
various figures and buildings.
But what had
It
happened
just seems so,
here?
so
And how had the
stupid.
place fallen into such
I'm sorry
ruin?
if people passed away for real, but man, that's just so crazy. It's just so crazy. There was an implosion in the area. Oh, I heard what you mean.
Much of the
They've
stonework
been
Palacio
right now, I
saw,
understand.
including 8 large statues of men and women, altars, terraces, and a large plaza resembling the Colosseum of ancient Rome. He told the king was constructed with such skill that it could not
I know what you mean, but
possibly
can you
have been
imagine?
created by a people as rude as the natives of that province.
I'm sure they only brought that. Yeah, I know what you mean, dude. But like, if you think,
And yet,
I know what you mean.
though
But
they had little knowledge of the site's history,
if
at
you,
least that they were willing
like,
to
you're
share,
right. That's definitely what they did. But if
it
you,
does mention
if you can
certain
imagine,
legends from the time of the conquistadors'
the Hunter
initial
Biden, they weren't.
arrival
If you imagine they're not trying to hide anything, which they are. I bet they probably just
of a great
let
Yucatec king who in ancient times
let it until the
come
air
down to
ran
the
out
region
so
from
that
the
people
north
can come to their own
build a mighty
conclusions that
city,
these people have passed instead
only
of...
to return from whence he came.
Because imagine, like,
after
the
a
people still
number
have
of
hope,
years,
and the Navy comes out and says, no, we heard this explosion, they're all dead.
leaving forlorn ruins
Like,
in his wake.
I'm sure they waited out the air so that people came to that own conclusion themselves instead of saying, yeah, they
Palacio's
fucking
questions would
are dead
remain
right
unanswered.
now. It'd be so traumatic. There'd be so much trauma.
He would never reach his grandiose
Oh,
goals
really?
either,
Oh, wow, insane. I didn't know that.
eventually ending up on the coast of Mexico, an undistinguished sea captain, hunting and failing to catch English marauders like Sir Francis Drake.
Wow.
It's not known whether the king ever even read his account. Another document added to a swelling pile of imperial
is very
archives
emotional, man.
at the court of the Habsburg king. Just like the
course I
mighty
was sad
city
for them.
itself, forgotten for centuries.
I know what you mean, though. They're definitely sliding the fucking...
It's
I don't know
only
what they're
today
sliding, but
that the benefit of
there was this
hundreds
thing
of
where, like,
years of
JP Morgan
accumulated knowledge
came to,
we
like,
can
this
speak with any
$270
authority
million
about those
settlement
ruins.
or something because of an... They claimed they didn't know that Epstein was trafficking children or
Though
whatever.
Palacio and his men
And they made
went
this
to their
settlement,
graves with little knowledge
like
of what
$270
truly
million
it was that they
payout
saw.
to victims
We now know that they were perhaps the
Epstein
first
that weren't
non-natives to explore
announced
a
who they
vanished
were.
world which reached its peak and collapsed hundreds of years before the European arrival. For they were walking within the walls of the great city of Copan. One of the powerhouses of classic Maya civilization. A far-reaching culture that had once dominated the region from sea to sea. Guatemala hadn't always been a land of forest. Some 800 years before Palacio's day, almost the entire peninsula had been stripped of trees. To make way for vast agricultural estates. Elaborate networks of highways crisscrossing the land between towns and cities. Home to a leviathan
Yeah, Baron, I
population.
don't know if you heard in the news about me. I sold my RSX. I'm no longer doing Uber Eats.
During the
I decided
early
no
Middle
more
Ages,
Uber Eats.
as
Sold
Anglo-Saxon
it.
kings engaged in spars,
Canceled the
hundreds of
insurance. Nice,
Very
thanks,
few
buddy.
towns
Thanks, man.
to
Yeah, I
speak of
decided no more
existed
Uber
in
Eats.
Britain.
It's such a huge shift. Dude, I applied to be a
continent,
project management
Charlemagne
professional, a
ruled over a
PMP.
sprawling state.
It's a international
was
project
held
management
together
professional
little more than
recognition.
personal charisma,
You have to write a
crumbling
test
with
for it.
factions on his death.
And tell me if the
Vikings
podcast is
and
too loud.
Magyar
I've been trying to
raiders
avoid
came
echoing.
flooding into Christendom to usher in
Yeah, it's like
one of the
fucking
darkest
$500
centuries
fucking
in
test
history.
though, but what it does is it gives me international
In
accreditation.
Central
and
America,
I become a
vast
member,
cities
and
of
I
50,000
there's like a
and
project
more
management
sprawled
job board,
into an open
so I need to pass the
landscape
test
of
to get my
irrigated
project management
farms and
professional
settlements.
certification. And then, because a lot of jobs that applied to said, "Do you have this PMP
Masters of writing,
certification?" I had to say no, and they didn't get back to me.
advanced mathematics,
Yeah,
astronomy,
it's fucking a lot of money though. Fucking
elaborate
$500
calendrical
fucking dollars,
systems,
but whatever. It's my push to
public
get like a real
works.
career. It's the only way to fucking do it.
one of the most extraordinary civilizations the world has ever seen.
Thanks,
All
man. Oh, it
achieved
went all on
by
credit.
human hands alone. No domesticatable pack animals existing in this part of the world.
it's fake money. It's not like real
And just prior
$500.
to the
It's
collapse of the
500
classic
fake
Maya
money
world in the late 8th
that will become
century
real in the
AD,
future.
the total population outside the cities, hinted at in recent years by LiDAR ground surveying technology, may well have stood in the tens of millions. Indeed, Palacio had been correct in a way.
Yeah, but so just a big shift. Just a big
The Maya of his day in the 1570s
mental shift. Let me turn this podcast down a
were
little bit.
very different from
It's
their
a big
mighty
shift in
ancestors.
focus in work.
But given the Holocaust they'd suffered,
Because I'm looking
in
for my
the meantime,
career now, you know?
losing as much as 90% of their numbers
No more,
to zoonotic European disease.
no more Uber
alone.
Eats, no more bus
Spread from
driver.
pack animals
You know what I
brought
mean?
over by the first settlers.
I'm not judging those jobs, but it's just they're not me.
This comes as no surprise.
I'm a project manager. That's really who I am. I fucking manage shit. I get shit done. You know, like Uber Eats, 100% positive reviews over 95 deliveries. Gold in the first week. Get the fuck out of here. It's fucking superstar.
Unfortunately,
I fucking aced, like literally aced that job. That's even better than statistics. Like 95 out of 95 positives. That like even like it, statistically speaking, it's just insane.
The Carnegie Institute had to intervene drastically to save.
You'd have to account for people pushing the wrong button on their phone or something, like a thumbs down by accident. All these accidental presses, just even distribution theory, it just goes out the window. 100% perfect.
To growing urban centers and housing developments.
It's a metaphor. It's a metaphor for my fucking.
Secrets,
Yeah, I know. You know, it's
disappearing,
crazy.
black market,
Fucking.
and the collection
For sure,
of
there'd be
private
fucking
buyers.
pissed off people, but no, 95. Maybe just Canadians. Canadians are really nice. Ottawanians are nice.
For the world
They
at
must have had
large,
some bad
signs
Uber
of
drivers
global
in the past. Let me tell you that.
maintained the secrets of their ancestors away from praying eyes. It would be another 300 years from Palacio's time before their existence would
Like
finally
how-
be
like what?
definitively revealed. And at others, like the mighty capital of Calakmul, one of the superpowers of the Maya world, only investigated during the last few decades, and still as yet undiscovered centers. It will take much.
Please bring her in.
Today, some 40 or so massive classic sites have been located and studied. All unique.
We're playing pretty well today.
Piece by
We just
piece,
need the run,
adding
man.
their tales to the tapestry
We're
of
worn.
Maya civilization. Crumbling walls and palaces coated with the fading stories of their foundations. The likes of Calakmul and Tikal must surely be the pinnacles of it all. Mega sites poured over by historians,
bad.
archaeologists,
Yeah, like,
mythologists, and
my
art
old
historians
boss.
alike.
My old bosses have PMP in their LinkedIn. They're like
Many
project
other
management
huge
professionals,
centers existed too.
and they're moved on to better jobs. What's up, yo? What's up, Sandoval? Lunch break. Yo, what's up, Christian? How you doing, bro?
Karakol,
Dang, dude, you're working hard, man. You're working hard. It's a long
Hobart.
shift. That was a long first start of your shift, dude.
Palenque, Piedras Negras,
You're making people's dreams come true, Christian, by sending them Amazon
Yaxchilan,
stuff the next day. Not even memeing.
and of course,
Hardcore, bro. You're hard working, man. Congrats, it'll pay off, dude.
but even these
It will
near
pay off
unfathomably
financially, dude.
massive and impressive
spiritually.
places often
Your spiritual
pale in
karma
comparison
is
to an even
going
earlier
up and
time,
up,
a pre-classic
but we
first
can't ever
flourishing
stop
of Maya society,
and appreciate it, because when we do, that's when we become vain.
seen at places like Nakbay and El Mirador, during the
Anyways,
first millennium BC.
that's good, man. Make that money, dude.
El Mirador may very well have the largest pyramid in the world.
My boy. My man.
But these sites would have to wait until well into the 20th century to be rediscovered by the wider world. Much of their secrets still waiting to be unlocked.
Moving to Ottawa? Oh my gosh, man.
Despite conspiracy theorist claims to the contrary.
Dude, yeah, man. Yo,
Never was
congrats,
a real
man.
Mayan
That sounds
apocalypse.
exciting, dude. What,
As
wow,
we shall
dude.
see, after the
Congratulations,
collapse
man.
of
What
classic
would you
cities in
do?
the
Would you
9th
be
century,
working here? Would you
the
be
Mayans didn't
just,
disappear, rather changing their ways.
vacationing?
Post-classic
Are
society
you immigrating?
developing with the same writing system and culture
Is Christian
for
gonna
the
become
most
a
part
Canadian?
intact. Even cities.
The business thing with me and Amazon, yo, thanks, man.
Time.
Yo, so the business thing, I think you need to, so you need to get your license, your life insurance
Rising and
license,
falling on the ebb and flow
and
of
I
time.
think you
until
can
the
only
arrival
do
of the
that
Spaniards.
in Florida, where you're like
Today,
residing,
Mayans
like
still
living.
make up the majority of
Because
the
I couldn't get
population.
mine in Florida as a
Vast
Canadian. I don't want to be
areas of
negative, man.
Mexico,
I really don't want to be negative.
Guatemala,
Because what I did,
Belize,
I did the exact, like I
El
did like
Salvador,
literally the exact
and
same thing
Western
as you.
Honduras,
I moved to Florida and I wanted to get my license in Florida, and I learned I couldn't,
leaning on against
which
all
kind of
the
really
odds
frustrated
to
me
the lands of their ancestors.
because I'm not an American, and I had to come back to Canada to get my
Several
license,
million of them
which is
still
okay
speak one of the 28
because
Mayan
one, I mean, one, my
languages
girlfriend
as
and
their
family is
primary
here,
tongue.
but two, it's where my contacts are.
They've maintained many
You know what I
of the
mean? The people I
traditions,
know are here.
oral and written histories,
So,
rituals, and dances of the
help
ancestors.
me with the application first.
For the most part, though, after a struggle for survival
Yeah,
lasting some
Trump,
500
yo.
years, only recently
man.
have they been invited.
Yeah, dude. I'm just saying,
alongside
Christian. Like,
archaeologists
I don't want to be
and
negative, but it's like that life insurance investment business. It's gonna
This
take
is a
time to
story
make
that is
money.
still very much being told.
You know,
Besides the initial
it's
conquistadors
taking a
of the
lot longer
16th
than I
century,
thought for me.
It's a tale that features a colourful
Like,
cast
I made
of
plans.
explorers and
I got
fascinating
into debt.
scholars,
I made plans,
obsessed by that lost world.
banking on that I would be
unknown.
making money, and I'm not.
From 18th
So
century
I don't want
barons
you to make that same
19th
mistake.
century
But yeah, man,
travel
do it.
and early
Amazon, if you
archaeologists,
can, dude, that's genius, man. If you can
kings
find a
and
way to
queens
somehow
themselves who
work
ruled over the great
overseas
cities
in
of the
Amazon,
forest.
in Canada, I think it's really smart. The corporation's way. That's what I tried to do.
And of course, their descendants.
But the U.S.
Still
is
safeguard many of
man,
the
their
ruins to this
friggin'
day.
their legal system is just it's like definitely not bulletproof. But
Colliding continents.
if you don't do if you do everything legal, there's no way you can like stay. You gotta do everything illegal in the United
Quite
States.
simply, it's one of the
The legal
greatest
shit,
stories
like
ever
all
told.
fucking like padlocks. Could do it in Ottawa. Amazon on weekends. Wow, man. Yeah, dude, I would
Hello, and welcome.
need a
to
job,
History Time.
but I'm looking for more.
As always, I'm
I'll be
your
honest,
host,
man. I'm looking for
Kev.
more like career.
I've been obsessed
I know
with
Amazon is like
Colombian
great
Americans
career
since
nowadays.
childhood.
Amazon is now like
It's no
the
secret
with
that
the
in early
benefits and everything.
2000s, Michael Wood's
and the pay and
Conquistadors
everything.
is one of the reasons
But
I
I'm looking
pursued
for
the study
more
of
just,
history
like,
in the first place.
something in
Eventually
my career
writing an
of
undergraduate
science,
dissertation on the ritualistic
chemistry,
warfare of the
biology,
Mexica Aztecs.
project management. A manager,
Before
be a
embarking
manager
on
in
a parallel
Amazon. That'd be
voyage
great. I can
into
do
the
that.
early Middle Ages and ancient Eurasia. But all the while, the Americas called.
And vacation discounts. Nice. Nice, man. Well, dude, yeah, man.
Finally,
If you can find your way
February
here, man.
2022, I was lucky enough to visit Mexico.
But how? Yeah, okay, dude.
Guatemala
Let's
for myself.
set up that meeting with Andy and I on the Zoom. I will resend the email. I didn't resend it. I thought that you would find it, but I'll resend it. I can even just do it like now on break or something. And you set up the time on Calendly on the website. And it's like $100 US to join. It's a one-time payment. They're not gonna charge your card again. I got a $1,000 max credit limit card for when I signed up for World Financial Group because I didn't trust them. I thought they would charge my card, but they didn't. For like 2-3 months. So then after that, I learned they were legit. So then I canceled that card. But you don't have to do that. You don't have to do the same thing. You have to go buy a Visa card to charge it up for that.
There will be many individual stories too on my other channel, Pete Kelly. So go and check it out here. I'm creating an entire series on all
I don't know if
major
they
Mayan
accept
cities, and some little known ones too.
Like
It's a series
like if you go to a gas station, get like a Visa card at a gas station, you know what I mean? Just a Visa cash card. I don't know if they accept that.
I'd also like to thank Dr. David Miano from the World of Antiquity channel for creating the initial script for this video. It's more than doubled in length since, with my own meanderings.
But we can see.
So think of it as a
They
fusion
might. I mean, they might.
From Dr. Miano himself.
Thank you, Pete. David Miano here from the World of Antiquity channel. If you want to hear more about the Maya, come on over to watch our entire series, The Antiquities Travel Guide, Series 2, on the Yucatan. We explore some really fascinating sites. And if you like ancient history in general, there's plenty to watch on a whole host of topics. Back to you, Pete.
I really do recommend watching his content. And of course, my travel videos too. Now, before we get stuck into the entire history of the Mayas, the most ambitious project I've ever attempted, here's a quick word from our sponsor. The great lords of the classic Maya world didn't have to worry about cyber attacks. Living in a time of spirit battles and magic, theirs was a world before the internet. Today, though,
I did, but man, thanks, my dude.
Viruses and threats to cybersecurity, they wouldn't get far without some sort of defense. NordVPN would be perfect for any Maya aristocrat seeking to maintain their fortune.
NordVPN ad? Are you
Just a
serious?
regular 21st century humor.
Like, it's just so dumb.
Utilizing more than 5,000 servers in 59 countries.
I can't believe they put this shitty fucking ad in the middle of this video. Like, fuck you.
And every major platform.
Not you, Christian. I'm talking about the ad.
It doesn't
just
just
so
automatically
terrible.
scan for viruses and malware, but gives you anonymity too, allowing you to change your IP address to access films,
fuck this
TV,
shit.
music, and games available in
Terrible.
different countries. And one of the best features is that Nord encrypts your data, bypassing any potential data throttling by your internet service provider. Pakal knows. Now, I've teamed up with NordVPN to offer you an exclusive deal. Use my link in the description below and get 4 months completely free when you sign up for a 2-year deal. There's a 30-day money-back guarantee. Head on over to nordvpn.com/historytime and use the offer code HISTORYTIME to get your 3 months. Now, back to the Americas. In 1517, 3 ships set out from Cuba. under the command of a rich Andalusian hidalgo by the name of Francisco de Córdoba. The expedition was an ambitious attempt at fortune-seeking. Sailing toward the setting sun in search of new lands and riches for the taking. A smash-and-grab raid carried out by professional soldiers and adventurers in search of gold, silver, and slaves. But by this time, some 2 decades after the initial Spanish arrival on Cuba at Hispaniola,
Like, why?
and with both
So
islands
fucking dumb.
thoroughly pacified through an orgy of bloodshed, providing an easy base from which to go elsewhere, restless men began looking further afield. This was the very beginning of the age of the conquistadors. But unlike the more famous later campaigns of Hernán Cortés and Francisco Pizarro, this earliest of expeditions to the mainland of the New World was far from a success. After 21 long days at sea, battered by storms and the existential dread of uncharted open ocean, landfall was finally made. What happened next, later recalled in the memoirs of Bernal Diaz del Castillo, then a young soldier on one of his first adventures, was the stuff of nightmares. Floating in to a wide open bay, the landing parties are greeted by pristine woodland, running tracks past pearl-white sands, and beyond, temples rising. Many other settlements were spied from the boats as they made their way along the shoreline. Beyond the tree line, the white stuccoed walls of pyramids and temples towered over the beach. An advanced settlement, comparable to the old world.
Oh, please.
One of the sites, though now lost, is named accordingly Grand Cairo, perhaps near the island now known as Isla Mujeres, named for the female figurines once found inside the temples there. Tense meetings between Maya and Spaniards.
It's too
followed,
shit. It's just so fucking
small
shit.
items being traded, and ultimately fighting breaking out. Upon approaching those strange structures, figures began to emerge. And they were far from impressed by the Spaniards. Bernal Diaz talks of priests coated in blood, their hair matted and
Yo,
stiff
what up, Toad?
from recent
What's up, Toad?
sacrificial victims.
You see that? Jeez Louise!
They surrounded their unwanted guests, fumigating them with incense and gesturing.
What's up, man? How you doing?
Cordoba and his men soon got the
Ryan on
message,
cam.
heading back to the boats,
What?
but not before seizing a number of artifacts, and most importantly for them,
Brian Bosshart?
gold. Emboldened by the discovery of the gold, the expedition traveled westward
Texting me
to
the
mainland,
screenshot.
similarly tree-lined and pristine. Eventually, near the modern town of Champaton, they made camp on the land.
Insane. Oh, Clemens fucking
As was the wont of their
baiting
commander,
him out.
they said mass, making themselves at home.
Oh, what is he? Are they streaming right now?
Perhaps
Like literally right now? Dang it! Dang it! I was like, no one's streaming GoldenEye. I mean, what's his name is? I don't want to say what's his name. The Xbox guy. Terrible. True, because the Legends and the Elite, ridiculous. Yeah, really. Is this the run? No, it's not. This is really too slow, guys. It's just too slow, man.
In the ensuing carnage, 57 Spaniards lost their lives. Almost every other member of the expedition suffering arrow wounds, spear blows, or both. As the terrified survivors limped back to their boats, leaving wounded and dying comrades on the shore, Bernal Diaz could see the victorious Mayans dancing in the clothes of the dead.
Yeah, dude, we're having good runs, though. We're having actually like really good runs, man.
With as many as 12 wounds. Cordoba himself died during the voyage back to Cuba.
It's gonna happen eventually. That's what I mean. Like, I want to try some Bunker 1. I'm gonna try some.
Far from discouraging further attempts, it was the small pieces of gold that were the talk of the town. And just the next year, another, larger, better equipped expedition set forth. This time, led by Juan de Grijalva, the nephew of the governor of Cuba, and the future enemy of Hernan Cortés. Better organized and taking no chances this time, the second expedition also had 2 Spanish-speaking Maya on board to act as interpreters, captured by Cordoba at some point during
That
the
hop.
voyage.
That hop was so
Bernal
huge.
Diaz again took part.
Why? Like, what the fuck,
Making
man?
landfall at first on the island of Cozumel. Ultimately, they reached the mainland.
It's just so
One round
slow.
place, thick mats of jungle broke up well-cultivated fields of milpa, created by slash-and-burn agriculture. A number of generally unfriendly interactions followed. One resulting in cannon fire clearing out a Mayan city. But mostly, the expedition refused to stop, continuing on along the coast.
What? Such a scam.
Ultimately, they landed near Champoton, seeking vengeance for the previous battle. Again, a large force of Maya soon emerged. Bernal Diaz recalls a horrific battle, fought in marsh-ridden bogland, swarmed by locusts and flies. You can imagine the confusion of the Maya at the reading of the requiremento before battle by the Spanish priests. A proclamation to the Maya in Spanish of the Christian right to their lands unless they recanted their heathen ways. Thus, in the
I gotta do the natural stuff, my friends. Like, it's just so much faster. It's just significantly faster.
Perhaps making their own magic against the foreigners. The fighting was brutal, but in the end, it was the superior technology of the Europeans which won the day. Specifically, a number of small artillery pieces which awed the Maya into submission. And yet, when de Grijalva headed back to Cuba, besides information, he had little to show for his expedition. Eventually, it would turn out that there was in fact almost no gold at all in the peninsula, let alone metals, or even rivers. The undulating flatness of prehistoric coral sea floor.
And thank you for being here,
still
Toad.
seen there in the rocks today.
Wow,
Utterly
fucking the meat of the century. It's like, It's like it's like I'm missing this.
Gold
It's like
found by the
I'm
first
missing
expedition must have been traded
this meaning.
elsewhere.
You know what I mean? Like it's like I feel like I have to like I feel like I should turn the stream off and just fucking watch that. Maybe on break. Maybe on break I'll take a watch. They're fucking earlier time zone too. Whatever.
The third and final
I was watching Dogger earlier, anyways.
would be an even
The
more
Dogger
serious
scene.
undertaking. This time, led by a young upstart soldier by the name of Hernan Cortez. Again accompanied by Bernal Diaz. In search of gold,
Wow, the double duck.
they'd head
It's
north
huge.
to the valley
So
of
fast.
Mexico. Aided by terrible pestilences brought with the Europeans, and the support of a huge alliance of formerly subject Native Americans.
Like even that was 24.
The entire Aztec
It's
Empire
so
would be
fast,
brought to
man.
its knees in just a single year, forever changing the political and social landscape of the New World. Yet, even so, by the time Spaniards returned to the Yucatan in 1526, this time under Francisco Monteo, sailing under permission from King Charles V, progress would yet again be slow. Any semblance of conquest wouldn't be achieved for decades to come.
I have no health.
Real subjugation would take centuries, if completed at all. Characterized by a complicated series of back and forth conflicts. Of the three major civilizations of the New World, the conquistadors in the land of the Maya.
It would have been impossible. I had no grenades. If you have no grenades and you have that, if you have half of our health, it's pretty much over.
Often operating
Nothing you
as
can do.
independent warlords, sometimes vying with each other as much as the natives. Francisco de Monteo and his bastard son, El Mozo, are the most famous, still being remembered in their former colonial capital of Merida. But others too, like Alvarado the Cruel, made tracks down the mainland from the highlands of Mexico to Guatemala, murdering and rampaging as they went, fielding Nahuatl-speaking allies, often press-ganged into service. In the north, it mostly fell to El Mozo to get the job done, often doing so in horrifically brutal fashion.
Brutal.
Notably unleashing his lieutenant, Gaspar Pacheco, to torture, mutilate, and destroy his way through the countryside. Burning alive or feeding to his war dogs anyone unfortunate enough to fall into his hands. We're told that beautiful young women were specifically targeted as a reminder to the Spaniards to not breed with the Maya. In one particularly significant battle in around 1535, Nachi Cocon, a local king, led his warriors to war with the once mighty city of Chichen Itza. Then, largely in ruins, having reached its prime some 600 years earlier. Though still an important place of pilgrimage. There, in clear view of the great palaces of their ancestors, the Maya achieved the impossible, inflicting on the Spaniards a crushing and humiliating defeat. the months following, after a series of hasty retreats and evacuations, we're told that the only Spaniards left on the peninsula at all were 4 Franciscan friars. Of course, the soldiers would be back. By 1540, they began their attack on the city of Tihu, one of the foremost centres in the north. What the Spaniards thought of the place remains unclear. Little record remains. But based on what they would later call it, the ruins seem to have reminded them of the ancient Roman cities of Estremadura. Thus, the place was renamed Merida. Its great temples and pyramids dismantled, turned to cathedrals. Today, it's still the regional capital and largest city in the area. Finally, in 1546, when Tutul-Ju, most powerful chief of the province of Mani in the north of the Yucatan, converted to Christianity, the princes of the west soon followed suit.
What is this, like 25?
All that remained
So
then
fast.
was the east,
It's too
which
fast.
took much longer, and remained more rebellious forevermore. By that time, El Mozo and his father had already been outmaneuvered by political opponents, little richer than before all the fighting and the carnage began. Their fortunes far from having been made. They might have wondered what it had all been for. The Maya, on the other hand, by this time, had suffered immensely, not just from the military campaigns and indiscriminate violence, but from the ravages of European disease. Devastating pestilences like smallpox, cholera, typhus, and typhoid, for which they had no natural immunity, such as the Spaniards had, developed over 10,000 years of living alongside the animals from which these diseases had initially sprung, of which none existed in the New World. The fact that the Maya could even put up a fight at all remains incredible. What would have happened had the Spaniards arrived at the time of their mighty ancestors? Not a post-apocalyptic environment ravaged by disease, but such is fate. By this time, the world had changed. When John Lloyd Stevens hacked his way through the Guatemalan forests in 1839, on a diplomatic mission from the US president, he was interested in far more than just politics. The region then being embroiled in the latest in a complicated series of civil wars following the collapse of the Spanish Empire. He was stepping into an incredibly dangerous situation. His predecessors had all died on the job. Held up by bandits, regularly hindered by wet, muddy ground, and above all else, ridden by bouts of malaria, the as yet still undiscovered disease rife in the Central American forests. Stevens had an altogether different agenda to that of his official designation.
I have no hell.
An all-consuming passion that kept him going through hardship and toil. On this journey, Stevens wasn't alone. Travelling by his side stood his erstwhile companion, Frederick Catherwood, a British artist. Over the previous decade, both had travelled to the great sites of the classical Mediterranean. Jerusalem, Egypt, Istanbul. Spending a considerable amount of time delving into the ancient mysteries of the old world. And now they had their sights on the ruins of the new. Initially training as an architect, Catherwood had drawn immensely detailed dioramas of Jerusalem and Constantinople during his time in the East.
Man, if I can get a PB tonight, that would be so insane. Like, come on. Come on.
Complicated scenes.
I suck.
Stevens had written detailed letters to friends.
Even he was friggin' late. Like, it's just so terrible. I gotta do the natural stuff, man. It's so much faster. Like, it's so much faster.
Independently travel in Central America. The diplomatic role from the US government giving him the authority and the means. Over a series of journeys, the two men, proto-National Geographic journalist and photographer,
Christian. Boys, go back to work. Oh, sorry, man. Thanks for being here, chilling.
Recording in writing.
Congrats, make that money, man.
The remains of a once
Make that money.
urban society.
Make people happy.
In total, they would visit more than 44 sites. Even uncovering many
Thanks for the Christian.
that
Can't
never
be so
before
really
been
hams.
seen by Western
For
eyes.
sure, man. For sure, dude. Me too, man.
Their journeys were recorded in two books: Incidents of Travel in Central America, Chiapas and Yucatan, and Incidents of Travel in Yucatan, the latter in 2 volumes. Though photography hadn't yet been invented, Catherwood's background as an architect allowed him to create much more accurate
I don't know, man.
representations than most.
I usually work
Also
alone.
utilizing a cutting-edge invention, the daguerreotype, in their later journeys.
Oh, what? Like,
Resulting
what the fuck?
illustrations demonstrated to both the American public and the world just how beautiful and sophisticated Mayan art.
No, man,
and
I'm not down for that
architecture
shit. I
really
don't
was.
want no partner shit, no working with nobody. Thanks though, man.
To
But
say
thanks
that
to
the two
Home
men
Slice.
were amazed
Appreciate
when they
that.
arrived at the city of Copan in 1859.
Nothing against you.
Laying eyes on a Mayan city for the very first time would be a complete understatement. Even in its overgrown and dilapidated state,
You too, man.
this was very different from the sights of the old world, surpassing their wildest expectations. Though it would be at the city of Uxmal, famous for its incredibly ornate carvings known as the Pook style, that would arguably have the greatest impression on the pair. For it was here, in the shadow of gods and monsters, that their unorthodox ideas would be set in stone. In those days, an especially popular notion in all circles of life was that the civilization of the Maya had an old world origin. Speculation of its roots ranging from Egyptian, Hebrew, Norse,
Let's get this PV. Let's get it. Let's get this PV.
Chinese,
Let's do it.
and even
Let's get this PV.
Atlantean. Most Europeans could simply not imagine in their wildest dreams that such advancements could have been made by the people who lived there now. Even after the very first visits to the mainland between 1517 and 19, when assessing the idols and artifacts seized from the coast, the best minds in Cuba and Hispaniola alike could not fathom a Native American origin, assuming them to have been carried to the New World by Jewish colonists in the 1st century AD, after the destruction of the Temple of Jerusalem by the Romans.
Oh, come on.
Yet, Stevens and Catherwood, preferring to
Oh,
do
it's just so
things as
tragic.
objectively as
It's just
possible,
so tragic,
with
my
their
friends.
own eyes, had other ideas.
It's just so
Then,
tragic.
The rare experience of spending significant amounts of time at the ruins of both the old world and the new, the evidence was simply insurmountable. Those mighty forest-born edifices were not the result of people crossing over the immense gulf from the old world, a feat which had only just been achieved by Europeans, but by Native Americans, with no outside interference at all. It was a view that would ultimately be proved to be unquestionably correct. But in the 1840s, there was a long way to go before this was the norm. It may have been a scanty report written by an Irish adventurer by the name of Juan Galinda that encouraged Stevens and Catherwood to head to Copan in the first place. But they also had another major destination in mind. A similarly majestic and iconic city. One which had been known to Westerners for several decades now. Situated on the other edge of the impenetrable forest at the heart of the classic Maya world. Its original name is lost. We know the place as Palenque. Like many in the Western world, Stevens' initial interest in the Maya had likely been stirred up by the 1838 publication of a book by an eccentric Frenchman. Jean-Frédéric de Waldec's book, the first modern publication on the ruins, was very much of the opinion that Maya civilization had been kick-started by the arrival in the New World of the 10 lost tribes of Israel. Full of inaccurate illustrations and outlandish theories, it was a bestseller. Claiming descent from the Dukes of Waldeck-Pyrmont. If Waldeck is to be taken at face value, he'd been a royalist and a revolutionary in his youth, befriending the likes of Marie Antoinette and Robespierre.
This runs really, really fast. Like, really fucking fast.
Before participating in the Napoleonic Wars. Ultimately heading to the New World as a soldier of fortune, artist and explorer. once claiming to have travelled by river all the way from Peru to Mexico. A claim that today is quite easy to refute. He claimed friendships with many of the most famous figures of the age, the likes of Lord Byron, Fox, Pitt, and even King George III. Ultimately dying, if his year of birth is to be believed, aged 109. With little way of validating his claims to one of old Europe's most prestigious baronies. It's difficult to back up any of his claims.
That was really fast. That was really fast run.
He spent an entire
Even the glass opening was fast.
Drawing and speculating to his heart's content at the expense of Lord Kingsborough, an Irish baron who shared Waldeck's ideas of the lost tribes of Israel. Unfortunately, Waldeck's drawings, whilst somewhat impressive, were far from accurate. Often resembling the old world more than the new. Perhaps a little like the early drawers and describers of the Aztec capital of Tenochtitlan, who likened the place to Moorish architecture for lack of an outside frame of reference to go on. Very much looking for evidence of the old world in the new. Waldeck even entirely made up elements of his drawings, either consciously or unconsciously adding phantom elephants into the glyphs.
Why?
After all, another common idea at the time was of an Asian origin for the Maya. As soon as Palenque had been rediscovered by the wider world, in fact, these wild theories had been absolutely the norm. In the 1770s, having been sent to carry out an official survey, Antonio Bernasconi drew remarkably misleading drawings of Maya nobles in Spanish knee breeches. And at the end of the 18th century, Antonio del Rio, working on orders from the King of Spain to investigate the ruins of Central America, decided them to be Greco-Roman in origin. Taking samples and causing much destruction and looting in the process. Even in 1839, at the same time that Stevens and Catherwood began their journey, a parallel expedition to Palenque took place. This one from British Honduras, led by colonial officials, Captains Walker and Caddy. After a grueling march through the forest, where they lost one of their party to malaria, in their unimaginative report on the ruins, Egypto-Indian origins were hypothesized. And yet, Walker and Caddy would soon be forgotten. As would Waldeck, besides those interested in his eccentric lifestyle. Stevens and Catherwood, however, would win lasting, worldwide fame. Their perceptions of a Native American Mayan civilization, along with the beginnings of real archaeological inquiry in the region, would soon take off. Though there is an argument that Stevens was ultimately swayed more by his desire to allow the new world to stand on its own feet and not be completely defined by the old, rather than a genuine respect and understanding of the Maya.
Why? Where are you going?
The result was still undeniably powerful.
Guys, this level is just so dumb.
To further develop
Like,
the real history of the region. Today, with pseudo-archaeological ideas still in full force.
Wait, you're it.
It's difficult to
Looking for a
overstate the
partner.
impact of Stevens
No.
and Catherwood.
It's just so dumb, guys.
Nevertheless, very much men of their time. They would attempt to have an entire Mayan city moved to America, along with plenty of artifacts, attempting to set up a museum in the States, which ultimately failed when the building containing these and Catherwood's dioramas, his life's work, all burned down, leaving Catherwood ruined. Not long after, they'd both be dead. Malaria finally catching up with Stevens, and Catherwood a sinking ship. Despite the terrible tragedy that ended the hopes of a Museum of the Americas, there is a good
forgot.
case for them
I completely
simply
forgot that I
indulging
only have
out of
one
a
bullet.
desire to save the artifacts. During a time when their opinions on Native Americans were incredibly rare. During this age, before the Indian Wars had even happened, at the very beginning of the Wild West, Stevens and Catherwood thought the natives to be capable of such things. And yet, by the time of their deaths, besides architecture, still next to nothing was really known of these places. And legends abounded of still yet undiscovered cities. Tikal, Yaxchilan, and so many more. Soon, they too would be uncovered. The story was just beginning. Today, almost 200 years later, other travelers, scientists, adventurers, and researchers from foreign lands have discovered so much more about Maya civilization. To the point where most outsiders now know and appreciate its importance. The Maya were a people of great achievements in the fields of mathematics, astronomy, calendrics, architecture, sculpture, painting, writing, and political organization. The more we learn about them, the more profound our respect becomes. Great discoveries like the city of Calakmul have only recently been made, and even more still await discovery. The first Europeans to arrive on the North American mainland often did so by accident. In 1511, atop the towered decks of a swift-faring caravel, state-of-the-art technology for the time, Captain Juan Hernandez Valdivia was making his way from the recently conquered coastline of Panama to Hispaniola. Then, all still thought to be part of the Indies, somewhere between Europe and China. He and his men had taken part in the conquest there, but now headed back to the governor of Hispaniola to level a complaint against a rival. Heading past uncharted shallows off Jamaica, however, the unthinkable happened. The ship began to break up. ultimately sending 10,000 crowns of gold and untold lives to the depths of Poseidon. Just 18 survivors made it into the ship's lifeboat. With no sails and not enough oars to go around, the 16 men and 2 women were helpless, slowly drifting from Jamaica toward the open sea. And unbeknownst to them, to the Yucatan beyond.
No.
With no food or water, 7 more died on the accursed drifting, before finally they were unceremoniously deposited on the island of Cozumel.
Crazy. That's cool.
Cut off from the outer world for well over 10,000 years, when the priests and priestesses of the moon god Ixchel saw the castaways that the sea had given to them that day, they must have rejoiced. Cozumel was a place of pilgrimage for travelers from all over
Oh wow,
the region
insane.
and beyond, coming from as far away as Nicaragua and western Mexico to seek the blessings of the resident patron of medicine. Thus, the custodian of the shrine, far from assuming the malnourished Europeans to be gods, took the miserable-looking guests on face value, as bounty of the sea, gifts from the spirit world.
I'm gonna get some food. I'm gonna take a break. I haven't eaten after my workout yet. Can you believe it?
Soon
I'm
enough,
so hungry.
Captain Valdivia and 4 others were taken up to the temple, where gathering crowds rejoiced.
Awful.
One by one,
Make you
their
shaming me.
chests sliced
No,
open,
I was feeling pretty fat.
still beating hearts.
I got a lot of fat on me.
For all to
So I was
see.
hoping that this would burn some maybe. I'm just feeling just kind of just gross now. Just my stomach is just empty. My stomach feels like a dog
As
that
brutal
you
and
missed
barbaric
feeding and the
as
dog
may
is just
seem
looking
to
at you
us,
guilty.
Sacrifice
stomach's doing
was a
right now.
deeply ingrained part of Maya society. A way of continuing prosperity, ensuring the survival
Salad
of the
pot, that's a great
universe
idea.
itself and all
I
humanity.
might do that. Yeah, I definitely do.
Self-sacrifice by Horus was the most common
And I did a lot of ab stuff today.
elaborate rituals where aristocrats would let their own blood to their people. Living in a different metaphysical reality than us, this was a completely normal and necessary part of life,
I thought I was gonna sleep.
as it was at some
Usually
point
after my workout I
almost
sleep
all
right away.
societies on Earth.
So I figured if I eat and sleep, it's just gonna
The 7 survivors
not get
were
any
kept in a
gains in
cage,
terms of cutting the fat.
and fattened up for a later festival.
Wow, they said fattened up at the same time as we did. That's
One
insane.
particularly difficult prisoner had his head split open with an axe.
Jesus.
He lived, if it can be called that, enduring for 3 more years with a dim-witted clown at the court of the local chief. For the others, gradually growing in strength in preparation for their impending sacrifice, luck was with them. Eventually, managing to escape,
Yeah, I think I'm gonna go at
they
least get something to
ultimately came
eat.
into the possession of a more
and take a
merciful
break.
ruler on the mainland,
I'm gonna keep streaming though.
by the name of Aquincus. Seemingly content to allow them to live on as his slaves. In the coming years, the relentless work of grinding maize into flour and disease killed off all but 2 men. The fate of each being very different. One, a priest named Geronimo de Aguilar, would eventually be rescued by Hernan Cortés in 1519. By which time, he'd almost forgotten Spanish and resembled a hermit. He would go on to play a vital role in the conquest of Mexico as an interpreter. The other,
Oh my gosh.
fortune,
I need to take a break. I'm gonna get some food.
resolutely
I'm gonna keep streaming.
refused to return.
Thanks for being here.
Having gained the favor of a local king, Nachancan, he'd risen through the ranks as a useful war leader, and by the time Cortés sent for him, he had a wife, children, tattoos, and as would happen so many more times over the coming centuries, had completely integrated into Maya society. He even seems to have helped orchestrate effective resistance against the Spaniards. At first in the late 1520s by giving misleading reports to Alonso de Villa and Francisco de Monteo about the whereabouts of the other, which delayed their movements until 1531. And later with actual military campaign. By 1535, his broken body is said to have been found amidst countless native allies, struck down whilst leading a massive fleet of 50 war canoes to Honduras to fight the Spanish there. By the middle of the 16th century, a mere single generation had passed from that time. And old traditions die hard. The Maya, cut off from the outside world to develop in isolation since the last ice age, existed in a different reality. Of old, their days had begun at sunset. The darkness ushering in the time of spirits and demons. Theirs was a society in awe at the wild world around them, in tune with it. And sometimes that world,
We just need the
beautiful, yet far from peaceful and easygoing, demanded sacrifice. From the 1540s onwards, when mass conversions to Christianity began, the merging
Yeah, I
of
like
two
it. I like the new
worlds
stream
had
setup. I like the
unusual
full
results.
screen game still, and then all the other nonsense on the
Idiosyncrasies
left.
and syncretisms often tolerated by Christian priests as a means to an end. As a result, elements of the old faith remained in the new. For example, in many areas, alongside Christ, the Father, and the Holy Spirit, the cross itself was worshipped as a separate entity. As early as the first half of the 16th century, a certain priest named Chilim Anbao was burned alive. His crime, proclaiming himself to be the Son of God. And in 1560, a single generation or so after the conquest, stranger events are spoken of too. In that time, prophecies had begun to spread through the land. Talk of the return of a great storm that had ravaged Yucatan in the 15th century. For the illiterate, still largely unchristianized masses, born into a world where the divine and the supernatural could very much be bargained with. It was obvious what had to be done to appease the rain god. In the church of Satuta, 2 boys were sacrificed by having their hearts torn out. Another 2 met the same fate, apparently for the benefit of the mortally sick cacique, or chief of the community, Juan Cocon. Those responsible saying the following words:
Lord powerful God, these hearts we offer you, and we sacrifice to you these boys in order that you may give life to our governor.
Crucifixions were carried out as sacred cenotes. In some cases, victims being hurled in whilst still alive and nailed to the cross. Others were killed first and then hurled in. Some had their hearts torn out. Juan Cocon's brother, Lorenzo, was one notable leader of this partial return to the old gods. Personally sacrificing 3 boys by throwing them alive into the well of sacrifice at Chichen Itza. Again, we are told of references to Christianity.
You see the figure of Jesus Christ, and we offer to our gods the hearts of these we have sacrificed. Let these girls die, crucified, as did Jesus Christ.
It's not difficult to see how the teachings of Christianity became entwined with the religion of the Maya. The idea of the blood sacrifice at the core of the faith is the very reason why Christianity took off at all in the New World. And for many Christians, whose teachings emphasized above all else the merits of a good death, martyrdom, or dying for something, was revered as the ultimate way to go. Arguably, Christianity would not exist without martyrdom. It having won the faith its power and support during the early centuries. And emulating Christ was widely thought to have guaranteed a place in paradise. Thus, if suffering like Jesus and dying for God was an achievement, then why not sacrifice? Especially if it could satiate the older gods too. Not wishing to offend any of the deities, there even seems to have been a preference for holding sacrifices during the Christian Holy Week. Though the citizens of Satuta and the surrounding areas no doubt believed what they were doing was for the good of their people, Spain's retribution would be swift. The perceived slide back into paganism ultimately ending in one of the greatest tragedies of the entire conquest. Enter Diego de Landa. One of the earliest Franciscan friars to arrive in the Yucatan in 1549, at the age of just 25, Landa took it upon himself to save the souls of those he came into contact with, by personally walking the entirety of the peninsula to preach to the most remote villages. Fearlessly heading deep into only just conquered lands, where anti-Spanish sentiment was often still fierce. Early on, he came into contact with the old faith. His biographer, Lopez de Cogaludo, recording one incident in particular, where he came upon a crowd of 300 about to sacrifice a boy. Enraged, Delander embarked on what he saw as the only solution: destroying idols and preaching. By 1561, by then a veteran churchman, when Delander heard of the events at Satuta, as far as he was concerned, there was only one thing for it. The governor, Diego Cuada, agreed. Inquisition. Just like had happened and would continue to happen in the religious wars burning across Europe, Diego Delander was granted special powers to prosecute and question heretics outside of the law. Much of what we know of the events to follow come from his own writings. Upon hearing of the approach of the Spaniards, Lorenzo Cacon committed suicide. Thousands of others wouldn't be so lucky. In the orgy of publicly executed mass violence that followed, 4,549 men and women were paraded in the streets before they were tortured en masse in the town square. A total of 6,330 were fined, all meticulously recorded for posterity. Some suffered as many as 200 lashes, several dying from their wounds. Others were hung upside down, naked, with heavy stones tied to their feet. Still more suffered the excruciating agony of being tied to the burrow or wooden frame. All the while, priests and inquisitors hovered around the hellish scene, dripping scalding hot wax onto the naked bodies of their captives, as they ever presented parchment and ink for anyone willing to confess. Perhaps most horrid of all was a technique reserved for individuals deemed to be particularly guilty. The mouth of the victim would be held open as gallons of water were poured in. The torturers would then jump on the extended belly. A hideous mixture of blood and water then pouring out of the mouth, nose, and ears. It's not known exactly how many died as a result of torture on that day, but probably around 200. And yet, there was even more tragedy to come. For when the confessions inevitably began mounting up, the purging would begin. After enduring the worst of Delander's tortures, one of the high-ranking men of the town, Juan Cocon, eventually admitted to having 3 idols in his possession. This wasn't nearly enough for the inquisitors, and eventually, after yet more excruciating agony, he admitted to 20 more. Only after Juan admitted to having 29 idols in his possession was he allowed respite from the pain. What these idols were exactly remains unclear, but in Delander's own writings he describes the total haul similarly extracted from the leading figures of the town, hidden since the Spanish conquest. 13 great carved altar stones, 22 smaller stones, 197 ornate vases, and, most important of all, 27 deerskin rolls of priceless, pre-conquest hieroglyphic writing. In 1562, out on the plaza in front of the church, where once pyramids and temples had loomed, everything was destroyed. The idols smashed apart. Priceless Maya books, kept in secret since the conquest, burned. Delander wasn't without his own critics. The situation became so controversial that he was eventually ordered to Spain to account for his actions. Though ultimately they were deemed to be justified. The persecutions and purges would continue. The tragedy at Mani was just one example of similar purges going on over hundreds of years, resulting in many areas in a complete severing of Maya connections to their own past. In time, even traditional Maya dress would be banned, the ornate patterns often having meanings and hidden symbols that could no longer be tolerated. When Cortés first arrived in the Yucatan in 1519, he'd seen plenty of manuscript rolls with his own eyes, written on long sheets of paper made from the inner bark of a variety of trees, testament to a once flourishing literary tradition. But as the years went by, their very existence would be forgotten for hundreds of years. Only in the 20th century would the world at large remember that the Maya had even possessed writing at all. Today, a mere 3 or 4 Mayan codices survive. And yet, Diego de Landa is a wildly paradoxical figure. The book that he eventually wrote is by far our most complete source for the 16th century Maya. As much as he worked to destroy their pagan culture, he often talks of them with respect, doing more than anyone else to record their culture, just as he consigned it to history at the same time. He was horrified, yet curious, and this curiosity leading to accurate descriptions of the original layouts of Mayan cities like Tihu and Izamal, both turned into Spanish colonial centers. The only reason we have any information about them at all. And in the tradition of Stephens and Catherwood, he even conjectured about the Mayans of yore, how their cities had been much larger in the past. By the early 20th century, though much had changed for the better, most scholars were of the opinion that although the Maya certainly recorded astronomical phenomena in their texts, it was unlikely that they recorded history. Instead, their writing being a priestly, esoteric language, never meant for general use or mass consumption in regular society. This had not been the opinion of John Lloyd Stephens, recording his thoughts in customary, flowery prose.
America, say historians, was peopled by savages. But savages never reared these structures. Savages never carved these stones. Standing as they do in the depths of a tropical forest, silent and solemn, strange in design, excellent in sculpture, rich in ornament, their whole history so entirely unknown, with hieroglyphics explaining all but perfectly unintelligible. No Champollion has yet brought to them the energies of his inquiring mind. Who shall read them?
His words were prescient, because as the 20th century unfolded, his hunch would turn out to be correct. The Maya did indeed record their histories. Meticulously writing of kings and queens, marriages, genealogies, alliances, and conflicts. The road of decipherment has been a long one, undertaken by thousands of individuals over hundreds of years, and it is still very much in process. But great progress has been made. Interestingly, it was Diego de Landa's writings that laid the groundwork. An account of events in Yucatan contained many interviews with Maya during the immediate post-conquest period, including literate scribes who provided vital information about Maya hieroglyphs. But most importantly of all, he recorded their calendar, with drawings of the day and month signs, as well as the then undecipherable alphabet. Ironically, that date from the Maya calendar, along with a written book known as the Chilen Balam, dating from just after the conquest, would form the starting point for successful attempts to decipher the Maya script. In the decades following Stevens and Catherwood's expeditions, with the help of de Landa's work and sources like the Chilen Balam, many scholars attempted and failed to translate the Maya writing system. A major issue being the assumed link to Egyptian hieroglyphics, successfully translated by Frenchman Jean-François Champollion just a few decades earlier. Only when the rulebook of the Old World was thrown out entirely did scholars begin to realize they'd been reading the scripts backwards. Finally, by the latter half of the century, developments began to be made. Notable pioneers of the decipherment of mathematical and astronomical symbols were Ernst Forstermann, a philologist and head of the Dresden Library, who interpreted the month signs and many numerical symbols, including the zero and the Maya long count, and J. Thomas Goodman, a Nevada newsman and friend of Mark Twain, who found the correlation between the Maya calendar and the modern Western one. Colour glyphs were deciphered by Edward Seller, and deity names by Paul Schellers. By the early 20th century, the astronomical and calendrical records of the Maya were so well understood that scholars even repudiated phonetic approaches to the Maya writing system. In fact, as late as the 1950s, it was still being argued that the Maya texts were entirely logographic, containing no historical information. It was on the Usumacinta River, deep in the wilds of Guatemala, that one of the great breakthroughs of the Maya code would be made. Like Guatemala itself, it's a Nahuatl word, thought to have been named as such by the mercenaries of Alvarado the Cruel in the mid-16th century. By his time, it was a largely unpopulated land, having been abandoned by city builders some 600 years earlier. But during the height of the classical period, this had been one of the most densely populated and powerful regions in the entire Maya world. Great cities like Yaxchilan, Dos Pilas, and Naranjo, dominating and vying for water traffic, along with many other smaller sites that they fought over during their long histories. It was at one of these powerhouses, Piedras Negras, that a young scholar of Russian descent worked in the 1930s. Amidst crocodile-infested waters and overgrown banks, Tatiana Proskoryakov would first have the idea that the stelas and monuments found at sites like this were indeed recording historical events. The accomplishments of rulers with corresponding dates. When later in life, she, along with other scholars like Heinrich Berlin, were able to prove this to be true, Berlin noticing in 1958 that certain glyphs seemed to refer to cities or ruling dynasties, one of the first great surprises in a long line, the paradigm would shift completely. Thus far, Mayan writing had been interpreted semantically, each sign being seen as a logogram holding a certain meaning. But the work of scholars like Yuri Kozarov and David Kelly finally established that many Maya glyphs were to be read phonetically. For like Old World writing systems, this is a syllabic script. Work has only continued since then, and today about 80% of the most common glyphs have been deciphered. The pace of progress has increased as more and more scholars dedicate themselves to the endeavour. A breakthrough sometimes generating a chain of decipherments. A major boost in the understanding of Maya history came when a team of scholars reconstructed the royal dynasty of Palenque. Identifying the names of the rulers, beginning with Pakal the Great, sometimes referred to as the Alexander of the New World. Others worked out other references in the texts, like rituals, dates, deities, and ancestors. The result being that an amazingly detailed chronicle of Palenque's history could be revealed. But more on that later. Another team, led by Linda Shell and David Stewart, uncovered some of the history of Copan. And in 2000, Simon Martin and Nikolai Grube published a landmark book titled Chronicle of the Maya Kings and Queens, providing the dynastic history of no less than 11 major classic Maya kingdoms. A work Stevens and Catherwood could only have dreamt of. Today, vast amounts of information is known about the ancient Maya. Astonishing amounts. Perhaps more even than most 16th century Maya themselves. Not only has decipherment of Maya writing revealed the history of the ruling dynasties, but much about their cosmology, religious beliefs, astronomical science, calendars, and rituals. But where did it all begin? Where did the Maya come from? In order to answer these questions, we must go back to the very beginnings of archaeology in the New World, and of Mesoamerican culture in the first place. One day in the late 1850s, the exact year is lost. A farm worker clearing out a field in southern Veracruz came upon something unusual in the ground. Amidst the rocks and roots scattered in the scrub of the Hacienda Hueyapan, his spade hit something tough and unexpected. Urged to continue his work and dig out what he and his boss suspected to be a large iron cauldron from the colonial period. To the man's great surprise, it wasn't long before a great colossal eye stared back. Further digging revealed an entire gigantic head, crafted of volcanic stone and hidden in the ground for thousands of years. The discovery was the first in a series of immaculately carved Goliath heads that would be found in the coming decades. Thought to represent the kings or shamanic chiefs of a long-deceased civilization. Some 2,500 years after their fall, the Olmecs had re-emerged. All but forgotten until that day, leaving no discernible trace that they'd ever existed at all. Not even their stories survived. The name itself, meaning rubber people, is one given to the region's inhabitants by the Aztecs, speaking of their own trade links with the descendants of that once great society, separated by eons. For it was here, along Mexico's Gulf Coast, that some of the very first sedentary farming cultures in Mesoamerica flourished. And though the situation is now thought to have been much more complicated, the Olmecs are still regarded by many archaeologists as the best candidate for a Mesoamerican mother culture from which all others, like the Maya, sprung. As centuries of study has shown, between around 1150 and 900 BC, the Olmecs came to prominence. With the construction of a low hilltop ceremonial centre, known today as San Lorenzo. Surrounded by well-organised farmlands and sedentary settlements. For by this time, the staple Mesoamerican agricultural package of maize, beans and squash was already in full swing. The monumental construction of San Lorenzo required hundreds of labourers to level the peak of a hilltop. Thus, it was likely achieved by a society with social stratification and a definite elite. The carved stone monuments at San Lorenzo are of the same type, as at many other sites in the region, including the famous array of colossal carved stone heads, some incredibly lifelike, seeming to portray specific character traits in rulers. Undoubtedly, they represent a unified culture over a relatively wide area, existing for hundreds of years. Another major site of the Olmecs was found at La Venta, sitting on a salt dome surrounded by swamp. In the Middle Pre-Classic era, between 1000 and 500 BC, La Venta Island became a large and complex settlement, complete with monumental architecture and structures depicting elite individuals and religious symbols. Like the Maya, rather than a singular state, the Olmecs seem to have been organized into a series of chiefdoms. Depictions of their rulers seated in caves or niches, symbolizing the threshold between the physical and the supernatural worlds, is an indication of their authority as stewards of religion, perhaps as well as secular matters. Placating the forces of the supernatural for their people, sometimes seeming to take on animal features in shamanistic rituals as they mediated and traveled in the spirit world. The idea that the Olmec culture was the source of all subsequent civilization in Mesoamerica was accepted for well over a century. But in recent years, as knowledge of the pre-classic era has developed, it's become increasingly apparent that while the Olmecs certainly represented an especially important and influential society, leaving behind distinctive and impressive artifacts, no longer can we say that they were the Mesoamerican mother culture from which all others sprung. Today, the evidence shows that many complex Mesoamerican societies arose side by side, but independently in the Middle Pre-Classic era, beginning towards the end of the second millennium BC, each adapting to their own unique environmental setting. As time went on, these early societies began to interact with one another through trade and other relationships. Thus, no one culture influenced all the others. Instead, they each had their own innovations, which would then be adopted by their neighbors. The Olmecs most certainly were innovators of important practices as early as the second millennium BC, including the erection of freestanding monuments dedicated to rulers, and perhaps also writing, though this is still a matter of debate. Though it's important to remember that other cultures contributed too. It is in these early days, at the end of the second millennium BC, that the very beginnings of a distinctly Maya style can be found. Styles which will persist for an astonishing length of time. First developing into massive centres like Nakbe, El Mirador and Kamanul-Chuyu. And later, after their fall, into the classic sites. And finally, post-classic. waxing and waning over thousands of years. But how did it all begin? In recent years, the incorporation of new technologies like LiDAR ground surveys has completely revolutionized archaeology. Entire cities and vast temple complexes alike being uncovered without having to do any digging at all. In 2020, an aerial survey using LiDAR revealed the ruins of an immense ceremonial center at Aguada, Phoenix. Built atop an artificial plateau, 1,400 meters long and about 15 meters in height, with 9 causeways jutting out from it in all directions. Having been built between around 1000 and 800 BC, it is the oldest monumental Maya construction ever discovered, and paradoxically, one of the largest. Its existence calls into question the theory that Maya civilization developed slowly over several centuries. Generally, when archaeologists and historians speak of Maya civilization, they mean complex society, referring essentially to urban development. Markers of complex society include significant expansion of population and trade networks, intensive agriculture, craft specialization, record-keeping systems, large-scale public works, carved monuments, and unmistakable evidence of organized warfare. In the early 1st millennium BC, all of these emerge. Within just a few centuries, far surpassing the society of the Olmecs in terms of size, complexity, and sheer grandeur. Maya civilization emerged in 2 zones of Mesoamerica. The southern Maya area along the Pacific coast and highlands, and shortly thereafter, the Maya lowlands in the north. Although these regions are separated by geographical distance and obstacles, clearly shown by the multitudes of different Maya languages and dialects, interaction between the regions spurred on their growth and development, bringing in goods and ideas from far-off lands. This process of the transference of goods and ideas, far from unique in the world, began in the Middle Pre-Classic period, between 1000 and 400 BC, when certain individuals, through a variety of opportunities, were able to acquire resources others did not have access to, thus leading, just like in the ancient Near East, China and Africa alike, to social stratification and political control by a ruling class. Gradually growing in power until they were considered divine. Competition between these communities over resources ultimately led to increased warfare. The most attractive regions, those with prime soil, the best resources, or sacred status, are where most people wanted to live. And so, that is where the cities grew. At these polity capitals, public plazas were built, followed by monuments, elite residences, and ceremonial precincts. This is where the rulers had their power bases, and were the centers of religious, economic, and funerary activities. Until recently, The largest known architecture of the Middle Preclassic was seen at places like La Blanca and Chalchuapa in the southern area. Los Mangeles is a site where examples of early tombs can be found. Discovered by the important 20th century Mayanist Michael D. Coe, however, in the outskirts of Guatemala City, between 400 and 100 BC, Kaminayulu grew to become the largest and most powerful polity in the southern area, controlling the jade and obsidian trade. A huge site that once covered over 5 square kilometers, including a number of irrigation canals. Its remaining earthen mounds are all that remains of the adobe plastered platforms once supported buildings of wood, thatch and mud plaster. Though generally considered one of the greatest archaeological discoveries ever made in the New World, today a mere tiny portion survives as an archaeological park, the rest having been swallowed by Guatemalan real estate developers in the 20th century. Meanwhile, great developments were happening out in the sea of trees of the Petén lowlands, where later Calakmul would arise. First, the city of Nakbe, considered one of the earliest of all Mayan cities. And then, at El Mirador, where archaeologist Richard Hansen has worked for decades. Here, immense architecture dominated. At El Mirador, the largest temples the ancient Maya could ever build were constructed, along with great causeways across the hinterlands, connecting the place both spiritually and economically with its subordinate satellites. The western group of structures at El Mirador is dominated by the massive El Tigre triadic temple, still only partially excavated and little understood, but even larger by its sheer mass is the Ladanta temple in the eastern group. Rising to a height of 70 meters, it is the tallest ancient structure that has been found to date in Mesoamerica, just slightly higher than even the Temple of the Sun at Teotihuacan. Still covered in trees and scrub today, it is considered by many archaeologists to be the largest pyramid in the entire world. That it was built at such an early stage in Mayan history baffles the mind. Like Old Kingdom Egypt, the power of those earliest rulers being absolute. It's still not clear whether El Mirador and Kaminaliuju represent the first Maya state systems, other centers still existing in both regions. Notably, no historical inscriptions or names of any rulers have ever been recovered from any of these pre-classic sites. And before long, their world would come to an end. Something happened in the terminal pre-classic that sent Maya civilization into decline. Economic and political disturbances of a nature we have not been able to ascertain saw the downfall of Kaminaliuju, El Mirador, and other powerful centers, and the complete abandonment of others. Perhaps caused by overpopulation, environmental degradation, pestilence, war, or a combination of all. But this did not end Maya civilization. There was still much land for the taking, where people would relocate. The pre-classic downfall paving the way for the resurrection of a host of new state-level polities in the period to follow. And of the people, some went back to the forest. Others moved out to neighbouring centres to begin anew. In 1848, a small band of adventurers made their way through the dense forests of northern Guatemala. Heading north from the remote island settlement of Flores. Based on their names, at least, they numbered Mayans amongst their ranks. Their leader, Ambrosio Tut, a Mayan name, was the governor of the town. Though, unfortunately, due to an inability to read or write, it is to his companion, Colonel Modesto Mendez, Chief Magistrate of Flores, that we must turn for the story. Near the centre of the Petén, the land was then still extremely inhospitable. Flores being an island of calm within the vast wilderness of green. And yet, out there in the expanse, protected from visitors for 1,000 years, stood a great city of the ancients. Unlike at Copan, there were no local myths that spoke of the place, it having been forgotten entirely. And yet, it was here that perhaps the greatest of all Mayan cities once stood. Nowhere else is there such evidence of the immense pride felt by the city's elites. Confident in the perpetual continuity and celebration of their achievements. Of course, Tut and Mendez had rediscovered the city of Tikal. Of all the Mayan cities, this one alone is consistently cited as the foremost, in both size and splendour. Today, Tikal still sprawls for miles and miles around, skyscrapers looming everywhere you look. A super city in a land of metropolises. The only rival superpower to come close to its supremacy being the Snake Kingdom of Calakmul. But that wouldn't be uncovered for more than a century to come. This city was not of the world of El Mirador and Nakbe that came before, but a new one. Very different in some ways, yet strikingly similar in others. The gods of those first powerhouses had failed, and now individuals would arise of similarly large centres. God kings, now possessing writing. The histories of this new classic age speak of Star Wars, where the usual ritualistic skirmishes to seek sacrificial victims were set aside in favour of total battle. They speak of contacts with the outside world too. Warlike newcomers coming down from the Valley of Mexico to the north, from where in later centuries would stem the Aztecs. As well as other neighbouring peoples as far south as the jungles of Costa Rica. The first signs of an increasingly cosmopolitan land, open to travellers and invaders from afar. It's possible that references to a great city in the forest, made by a certain priest named Alvarado, lost in the forest for several weeks during the subjugation of Flores in 1696, could have referenced Tikal. But even after its rediscovery in the 1850s, it took decades for word to slowly trickle out. Even longer for the archaeologists to move in. In the early 1880s, British explorer Alfred Maudsley came to investigate the place. But it was Austrian archaeologist Theobert Mailer who thoroughly surveyed it for the first time in the 1890s and 1900s. During his expeditions along the eerily unpopulated Usumacinta River, one of the largest rivers in Central America, where he also rediscovered the cities of Naranjo and Alta de Sacrificio. By this time, the immense diversity of classic Maya sites had become apparent, like the river port of Yaxchilan, Terraced dos Pilas, and of course, sprawling Tikal. These were the centres of the classic era, the very pinnacle and apogee of Mayan civilization. But how did it all begin? Between around 200 and 600 AD, after a brief hiatus, a great phase of growth took place throughout the Maya world. In the lowlands, following the collapse of El Mirador, a series of powerful independent states emerged. Perhaps because they were freed from domination by that great city of old. A plethora of individual dynasties were now able to increase their own authority, taking complete control of their resources and people, ever fueled by competition with neighbors. One of these states was Tikal, anciently known as Mutul. Today, it is one of the largest and best documented Maya cities, instrumental in our understanding of the early Classic period. And now, thanks to the written inscriptions found on monuments all over the site, we can even tell some of its history. Around the year 100, Tikal's ruling dynasty was founded by a shadowy figure named Yash-Ebzuk. Interestingly, there are indications that he had come to Tikal from Kaminal-Juyu. Just like at Calakmul, home of the Snake dynasty, where there are some indications of links with El Mirador. On the north-south axis of the North Acropolis at Tikal, in 1962, a richly furnished tomb was found. Burial 85, as it is called, contained the headless skeleton of a very tall man. Some believe these to be the remains of the great progenitor of Tikal's royal house, Gyges.
Sorry.
Laid to rest all those centuries ago. In the central acropolis of Tikal sits the royal palace of Shak-Tok Ikshak I, sometimes known as Jaguar Paul, who ruled in the later 4th century. A good example of the architectural style of this period. The remains of a stela were found depicting the bottom half of Shak-Tok Ikshak. His legs are just about visible. He carries an axe shaped like a jaguar paw and is standing in a bound captive. Interestingly, this might be one of the very last orders carried out by the king. For from the north, in the Valley of Mexico, a Leviathan approached. The great city of the Mesoamerican world, flexing its muscle. The inscription bears a date corresponding to 376 AD. Just 2 years later, Shak-Tok Ikshak I was killed in a violent takeover, led by a certain Siaj Kak, or Fire is Born. A warlord referring to himself as Lord of the West.
I can't believe I
likely
did that. That was so
indicating
dumb of
the
me.
direction from which he
It's
had
too
come.
dumb. It's too slow. It's too slow.
As was the wont of a victorious war leader, Fire is Born took the throne for himself, before initiating a further campaign of expansion. At this time, a central Mexican powerhouse, largest pre-Columbian city the New World had ever seen, was beginning to
Toad, what's up,
extend
bro?
its influence into the Maya area.
That sounds awesome.
In an effort to more directly control the trade routes in cacao, cotton, jade, and other commodities. Of course, this was the age of Teotihuacan.
Bro,
Known
that sounds
by the
amazing. That
Aztecs,
sounds like the life,
couldn't
dude.
fathom the mighty ruins of their own day to have been the work of mortal men as the place of the gods. Teotihuacan established a
What are you
colony
doing
at
on
Montana.
the patio? Just hanging out?
Dominated trade
People
in the
watching?
central part of the
Enjoyed
Pacific coastal
Saint
plain
Jean Baptiste?
for more than 2 centuries. Its influence on certain Maya cities can be seen in architecture built during this period. Clearly displaying Teotihuacano artistic styles.
Insane. I'm so
Tikal
impressed
is
that you
one of
eat
these
ice cream,
sites.
especially at 1 a.m.
It
I
may
would be
be
very,
that
very
Fire is Born
obese.
was from Teotihuacan, or at least
I'm
an
not
allied power
using the word
working
obese in a
on its
derogatory
behalf.
sense. I'm just meaning in an objective sense. I would weigh much
There's a
heavier.
great deal of archaeological evidence to link the Maya world with that great city of the north. For example, a number of specific Mayan merchant quarters in the city. have been found.
what's up? Nothing wrong with being large.
In the coming decades, with the help of Teotihuacan, we know that
Actually, there's a
Tikal
lot
was able
of
to
medical
increase
issues
its
with it,
power
but other than that,
to eventually
I'm a
impose
libertarian,
its
as
authority
Dick has taught
over
me.
other powerful centers.
Toad has taught me. The double duck, massive.
Washaktoon,
It's the
Rio
run.
Azul, and Copan, where new
The
rulers
fat
were being
shaming
throned,
run.
subordinate status achieved.
Oh well.
From this point onwards, the kings of Tikal are often depicted wearing military regalia derived from central Mexico.
Yo, what up,
These
Stash?
goggle eyes worn by the rain god Tlaloc. The city solidified its control over other polities through military conquest and royal marriages designed to foment alliance. During the reign of Siaj Shan Kawil II, who ruled from 411 to 456, the first phase of Tikal's history reached the very height of its power. But
I have no health.
times were changing. That great king
All good here?
chose
Cool,
to
man.
return to the traditional Maya ways of old, associating himself with the original dynasty founded by
Okay,
Yash
that's cool.
Edzuk some 300 years earlier. A fascinating document has been discovered from his reign, Stela 31 as archaeologists call it. This magnificent monument depicts Siaj Chan Kawil in all his glory on the front. But on the back is an extensive hieroglyphic text recounting the entirety of the early history of the city. Historic texts of this sort are extremely rare. Further south, in what is Honduras today, lay another important city from this time, Copan. Evidence suggests that a new polity was established here by Tikal in the early 5th century, seeking to extend its reach into the southern borderlands in order to secure access to valuable resources like jade and obsidian. This lends interesting credence to the story from Palacio's visit in the 16th century of a great king coming from the north to found the place. Although there had been earlier rulers, the dynasty founded here by Tikal began with the accession of Chinch Yak Kuk Mo, the beneficiary of an orchestrated takeover in 426. He may have been related in some way to Fire is Born from Tikal, because he too took on the title Lord of the West. Or perhaps he had secured his authority by marrying a royal woman from Fire is Born's family. He appears to have been an elite lord in Tikal prior to his assuming authority in Copan. A unique source from the site is Altar Q, which depicts the kings in Yaksh Chukmo's dynasty. 16 of them, around 4 sides. One image depicts the great founder king himself, handing the royal scepter to the current king, the 16th. Although it hasn't 100% been established to be his, a tomb found in the Hunal structure at Copan probably contains the remains of that refounder of Copan's greatness. For here was found the skeleton of a male, estimated to have been between 55 and 75 years old. His teeth had been notched and
Why?
inlaid
Like, what
with
the
jade
fuck,
discs.
man?
He wore a Teotihuacano-style shell platelet helmet. His body had suffered many injuries, none of which were the cause of death. Due to these injuries, it's been hypothesized that he could have been a ball player as well as a warrior. After the tomb was sealed, a series of superimposed funerary temples over the years were built on top of it. most famous of the structures at Copan is the hieroglyphic stairway, completed in the reign of the 15th king. The largest of its kind found anywhere in the New World. The text on the stairs records the history of the dynasty. To the north, meanwhile, the Khan or Snake dynasty was on the rise. Soon to be the most powerful ruling house in all of Mesoamerica. As we have seen, the Snakes may have had their origin in El Mirador before moving elsewhere. A vase listing the early rulers of the dynasty refer to a man named Skyraiser. Who may have been the founder or refounder of former greatness. Now centered at Xivanche to the north. Seen in records at cities as far away as Belize, where longtime ally Caracol ruled. The Snakes steadily grew in power as rivals to Tikal. An early monument at Xivanche is the Temple of the Captives. Constructed in 464, it features a hieroglyphic stairway enumerating the captives taken in a battle by Yukshom Chen, king of Xivanche at the time. When Teotihuacan pulled its support for Tikal and other Mayan cities in the 6th century, ultimately collapsing entirely before long in a maelstrom of violence, the Snakes had the perfect opportunity to capitalize on Tikal's weakness. Establishing a substantial series of alliances with other lowland kingdoms that eventually nearly surrounded Tikal. On April 29th, 562, Xivanche's king, Sky Witness, accompanied by forces from Caracol, Naranjo, and Holmul, crushed Tikal in a decisive battle. The city was sacked, its portal to the otherworld captured. Its king probably sacrificed on one of his own altars. For this was the age of the so-called Star Wars, fought entirely for conquest, rather than ritual battle for sacrificial victims. Sky Witness's tomb can be found in the Temple of the Cormorants at Xivanche. His skull, riddled with scars, shows him to have been the veteran of many battles. Shortly thereafter, the Khan dynasty decided to move to a new location. A great royal center for a great dynasty. The city of Calakmul in the southern Yucatan. Its existence rediscovered only in the later 20th century. For the next century, this place would be the dominant power in the region, growing to an immense size. Its allies too growing mighty in the wake of Tikal's collapse. Inter-city competition was a key feature of Maya politics. Maya states being defined by war, the goal of which being to acquire and expand resources, labor, and prestige. Raids were often used to gain spoils and tribute. When victorious armies took large numbers of captives, they would be added to the workforce. And the more they could take, the more it would add to the state's prestige. That's why there are so many monuments featuring accounts of the taking of captives. These practices reinforced the centralization of authority and the stratification of society. Success in battle was achieved primarily by targeting an enemy state's subordinate towns, instead of going after the state capitals. But as time went on, and various powers attempted to outdo each other, the size and intensity of the wars could not help but increase.
Why?
And yet, at other times, we're told that wars could be fought entirely on the ball court. Representatives of rival powers playing for the continued prosperity of their cities. Major encounters were usually led by the king himself, he being carried around on an elaborate palanquin flanked by effigies of patron gods. If an army could capture one of the effigies of the enemy's patron deities, it was considered a noteworthy accomplishment. In most cases, the capture of an enemy king himself would not even be attempted. But in the more momentous battles, the so-called Star Wars or Star Shell Wars, when both kings were present and the objective was to conquer the other state completely, the taking of the other side's ruler and capital city was necessary. And yet, though these conflicts were particularly bloody, even though a vanquished king would be disgraced and even sacrificed on occasion, conquered states would not be incorporated into the victor's side. From what we can tell, Maya ideology tended to protect above all the continuity of a royal dynasty. Perhaps the elites simply didn't want to risk their own authority by showing that a dynasty could be overthrown. Or perhaps this was simply inconceivable due to the semi-divine status of royal houses. So, instead, they would find someone else from the same dynasty to take the defeated king's place. Forced to become vassal or subordinate to the victorious king. Thus, after defeat by Calakmul, Tikal was never annihilated, though it did greatly reduce in population and significance, monumental projects halting for a time. Of course, it would arise again. Calakmul's power reached its apogee during the reign of Yuknun the Great, ruling between 636 and about 686. Accomplished by a string of victories against Tikal and its allies, extending the influence of the city farther than it had ever been. But Tikal was not out yet. Beginning in the reign of Jashor Chan Kawil, who took the throne in 682, Tikal began to renew its power and its prestige through a program of cultural revitalization, with an emphasis on the glories of the past. Finally, in 695, Jashor Chan Kawil marched his forces.
You never know who's grinding in the shadows. Thanks, man. I know. I need a better time, dude.
The snakes were finally
I need a better
defeated.
time, man. I think Dynamics shared that he put in like 90 hours to go from
Armies
144 to like
apparently carried
141 or
images like these
something.
as a form of divine protection on the battlefield.
He has 140, but
And if an enemy
the
could
video
capture
is
one,
messed up.
it was considered a major
So it took him like
trophy
90
and
hours.
a religious
He,
victory.
I think he got like 140 after 40 hours or something. Then again, that's Dynamics DJ, right?
A carved
Mr.
wooden lintel found
Bunker
in
1
Kel's
SA
Temple
23, if I'm not mistaken.
portrays Jashor Chankawil celebrating his great triumph. He sits on his throne, and at his feet, the captured Kalakmul deity.
We could actually quantify it because we have every single stream. We can actually go back
Remains of a stucco panel
and
on
literally
one of Tikal's buildings,
quantify
structure
it.
5D57, shows the great king
It's a lot of
Jashor
work, though.
Chankawil, with a bound captive before him.
1,000 hours.
Before
Yeah.
they were sacrificed in Tikal, the unfortunate Kalakmul prisoners of war from this
Maybe in
battle
the last
put on
like
display
2-3
for
years,
all to see.
maybe. But dude, like
clear
David Clemens was
indication of the
doing like
changing fortunes of the
8-hour streams for like 6, 7, 8 months.
Although it was Jashor
Almost every
Chankawil
night.
who started the process of
It's
restoring
insane.
Tikal's fortunes, it was his son who finished the job.
But dude, I'm so close, man.
736, 2 years after
I've
taking
done
the
that
throne,
too. Thanks,
he again
bro.
defeated
Thanks,
Kalakmul
homie.
in a major battle.
I'm like, man. Every session,
With the
every
Snake
session
Kingdom
we're
readers, He
paced.
followed up the victory with a series
Oh
of
my god.
defeats over Kalakmul's
In terms of
allies,
time,
breaking
terms of
up the
hours?
Confederation.
'cause I mean, he's got fucking
Tikal,
135,
once
man.
again,
It's
is back on
insane.
top. Position
I think the only way I can get 135 is if I do no body armor.
Around a century later,
Or if I get boosted through the
this final
exhaust
phase of
bay,
the
but even
classic
then I'm
era
too slow.
was when many of the greatest and most elaborate temples were built. The final grandeur.
When he
before the fall.
pauses to take out the disc, you could see
For out
the
in the
minute hand is
countryside,
at like 30
where immense
seconds,
tracts of forest
or the
had
second hand is
already
at
been
30
hacked
seconds,
down
and
to make
me
the necessary lime to
on
coat
my
the
natural
increasingly
stock
large pyramids
mainframes, mine
and
is like
temples,
32,
supporting the
33.
increasingly top-heavy
I don't
ruling
think I've ever
classes.
seen a 30 or a 29
were already
disc pause.
beginning to show.
I've only had like a 33, 32, probably 32 is my best. If you know what I mean, like this pause. See, I was like at 10 seconds now, 15. So I guess I'll verbally describe it.
In the jungles of
So when you pull out the
Chiapas,
disc,
howler monkeys scream. Trees
David
dance.
Clemens' 135 run, previous world
ancient
record, he's like
mysteries
now.
beckon.
And me and my best is like now. 32 and a half.
In 1746, Father Antonio de
And
Solis
that's just
arrived
the
here
first part.
with his brothers,
Oh, my best run
their
ever.
wives, and a whole tribe of sons, daughters, and nephews, seeking land to
He's
cultivate.
so fast in the dark
and a
room,
new
man.
beginning. As they began to roam around their new forest home at the far southern edge of Mexico, out in the tree line, they began to find ruined houses
Yeah, dude, no body armor might be the only way though.
built of stone, long since covered over in dense vegetation. Some ripped asunder by massive vines.
I am trying some no body armor
Long
runs,
time
right? You are
since
seeing me
anyone
try it.
lived here.
So it's like, it's not like I'm not trying it.
As they continued exploring,
So I can only try with like
it
full
wasn't
health.
long before vast pyramids
Am I throwing away
rose up
runs? No.
trees.
Because I'm trying it with slow runs, you know what I mean?
They were the
That's still
first
fast
known
enough to get a really good
people from
time.
the old world
And I still
to
pass
step
away,
foot
so it's
in this city
moot.
of the new,
It's just practice.
dead for nearly 1,000 years. As word slowly trickled out about Palenque, 3 official government expeditions were dispatched between 1784 and 1807. Yet, even so, a surprisingly long time would pass.
Thanks, man.
before
Thanks for
news of the
watching. Thanks
place
for your
reached
patience in
receptive
this. I
ears in
do want to
Europe.
play other levels.
Communications
the
with the
title
outside
too.
world, then still moving along at a glacial pace.
This one I feel like I'm
The forest and the deeply conservative
right
Spanish
there. Could
colonial
be any
administration
run.
holding all in its embrace.
But man, I
Some
like go to bed
200
knowing I've
years would
passed
pass
away.
before intense
I have passed
modern
away
archaeological investigations would begin.
freaking hundreds of
This
Aztec
time
guards.
carried out not by a European or an American, but a Mexican. When Alberto Ruz
Like how many
Lujulia arrived at Palenque
pizza
in
nuggets?
1949,
Pizza
he wouldn't finish
nuggets.
digging there until nearly 10 years later,
Like how many guards did I pass away there?
by which time perhaps the single greatest
9?
find in the entire history of Mayan
9
archaeology
guards
had well and truly taken
in
place.
28 seconds. If you pass away those in the dark room,
It all
11 to
began
12
with the
guards.
clearing of the undergrowth around the large monumental structure known
In
as the
30
Temple of
seconds.
the Inscriptions.
I love this level, man. It's just so good.
Noticing that the lower wall did not in fact
go to bed
end at
friggin'
ground level, Lujulia and his team
having
began
passed
to
away
dig
so many guards.
under the valley floor. Eventually getting down several meters to a stone opening
It's the
and
best.
vaulted staircase. Due to piles of rubble filling the gap, excavations would have to wait until the beginning of the 4th season in 1952. Year by year, step by step, Lujulia and his team were working towards the greatest discovery yet seen in the Americas. Eventually, the staircase reached a corridor, laden with boxes of shells, pottery, cinnabar, and jade, an early indication of what could be held within. For jade, most sought after of all Mayan goods, represented death and the afterlife.
Like, guys, I hate this fucking thing.
Up to this point, no Mayan
I fucked
tombs
up there,
had
my
ever been
bad.
excavated. Unlooted surviving burials being especially rare. Finally, the corridor ended in a large vaulted room, its walls coated in decorated stucco reliefs. Traces of pigments showing them to have once been
brutal.
colourfully painted. And in the centre of the room stood a vast carved block of decorated stone. An ornate slab, now famous around the world. Any resemblance to aliens, of course, is just a coincidence. Upon removing the slab, to the team's great joy, a skeleton was found within. Face covered in an ornate death mask of
Brutal.
jade.
It's really bad.
Eyes of shell and obsidian. His body adorned with all matter of pendants, diadems, rings, bracelets, ear and neck ornaments. All crafted of jade, the
Come
most
on,
precious
really?
material in the Maya world. Symbolic of life, death and immortality. A second casket contains 6 other bodies, thought to have been sacrificial victims, perhaps aiding the king on his way to divinity. As visualized by the surrounding stucco and sculptures,
Why?
buried under the forest floor for well over 1,000 years, Pakal's tomb had re-emerged from its slumber. It's difficult to overstate the importance of the discovery of that long-deceased king, ultimately changing everything in Maya studies. Pyramids, rather than being entirely external monuments, could play a funerary role, even containing the tombs of long-deceased rulers. And in Pakal's case, when eventually his story could be told, he'd become the most famous Maya ruler of them all. Coming to power at the age of just 12, Pakal resided over an extraordinary era for Palenque, waging wars and politicking with other powerhouses of the region, like Piedras Negras and Tonina, and engaging in a massive series of construction projects during his lengthy reign. Some of the most impressive the Maya ever built. And yet, no matter how extraordinary, Pakal was just one of a long tradition of dynasts to rule over this influential kingdom. Because, just like in much of the rest of the world, the most important social and political entity in Maya society was the ruling house. Those in the upper echelons possessing an estate of hereditary wealth, both material and immaterial, maintaining power over a specific location for many centuries. Often the entire lifetime of a city. These houses were defined by common origins, kinship, marriage alliances, religious beliefs, and the desire to keep power and status restricted to their group. One particularly interesting facet of these elite groups is that the ruling dynasties were not only governed by lineal descent through both patrilineal and matrilineal descendants, but also through lines of succession, descent of power and property. In other words, a ruler might not be tied to the ancestral founder of a dynasty genealogically, but simply through inheritance. He, and in some cases she, would still be considered a descendant of the ancestor, regardless of the bloodline. Perhaps allowing certain capable individuals to be promoted through merit, rather than simply heritage. Ukit Khan Lektok, the most famous ruler at the city of Ekbalam, was one such figure. You can watch my video here on that city to find out more. Nevertheless, the position of monarch still tended to be exclusively reserved for members of the ruling house, each identified by a specific emblem glyph. Royal power in Maya society was based on an elaborate ideology, including an entire worldview that dictated both the behavior of the people and the behavior of the ruler. First of all, the Maya king's legitimacy was owed to superior military prowess, the ability to protect the people and collect tribute from defeated enemies. The accumulation of tribute led to economic success. We don't know exactly how much kings managed the production and distribution of food and other necessities of life, but we know that they did manage the production and trade of prestige goods. They also commanded a sizable dedicated workforce, through labour owed to them by the people. Of course, these rulers tended to monopolise the wealth. Most easily shown in the sumptuous palaces that they built and resided in. Isolated from the rest of the people. The actual physical differences between elites and commoners are often profound too. Being seen in the archaeological record by height differences, showing clear disparities between the protein-rich foods that only the elites had access to.
It's just too rare, man.
And the ever so slightly malnourished everybody else. A conscious effort was also even made to make the groups look different from each other. Elites using cranial deformation to make themselves stand out as a people apart, touched by the divine. But there were times when commoner and highborn alike got together. During festivals, when rulers would often engage in self-sacrifice, piercing their bodies in painfully elaborate ways to bloodlet for the common good. And at the ball court, a constant in Mayan cities. And neighboring cultures as far north as Arizona and as far south as Costa Rica, where similarly ritualistic games and displays were played out, likely for all to see. Ball courts are a constant at Mayan cities, usually being moderate in size. But sometimes, like at Chichen Itza, they are absolutely massive, seeming to be far too large to play an actual game, but just the right size for rituals and festivities. Poc to Poc, the oldest ball game in the world, a version of which was played in the 2nd millennium BC, is still played today in many areas of Mexico, and Guatemala has a national team. While the rules have varied over time and space, on a basic level, it hasn't changed much. A team game, with the aim being to get the rubber ball into the hoop, using only the hip to do so. And yet, far more than just a game to those watching. This was a ritual of life and death, perhaps representing certain elements of religion and the birth and the continuation of the universe. Players often died during gameplay, such as one account just after the conquest from Diego Duran.
Where are you, man?
And sometimes, either the losing or the winning team would be sacrificed afterwards. Like the Olympic Games of ancient Greece, it may have had a festival element to it too. A coming together for societal good. And the people who'd be at those games, looking on, seeking patronage perhaps, were the commoners as well as the elite. Something along these lines might even be at the very heart of civilization itself. The goings-on of places like Poverty Point in the US and ancient henges in Neolithic Europe might not have been too dissimilar. The ball game has been played for as long as societies have existed in this part of the world. As we have seen, the Maya were never unified politically into a single state. Their world was organized into a system of independent kingdoms, some large and some small. Over a span of 2,000 years, from about 600 BC to 1500 AD, many Maya polities rose and fell. Some survived several centuries, others for much longer. The city of Lamanai was able to survive for 2,000 years. But such success was a rarity. Each Maya polity had a capital city, and usually some dependencies, forming a multi-tiered hierarchy of administrative centers. The closer to the capital that a center was, the higher it ranked. Because power was defined by territorial extent, the more settlements under the capital's control, the more formidable it would be. There is still disagreement amongst scholars as to how centralized power actually was. But it would seem that, like the early Greek polis and the Italian city-states of the Renaissance, there was diversity in organization, political and societal structure. By the late Classic period, most of the Maya lowlands were full of human settlements, including major cities, towns, and thousands of rural communities. The highest concentration of populations tended to be near water and at the best agricultural land. Often coming in the form of cenotes, natural sinkholes in the ground, and less commonly by the side of rivers, which are non-existent in the northern region. As we've seen, there were two basic classes in Maya society: elites and everybody else. Though the dividing line between them is not so clear-cut, some social mobility being possible. The groups were differentiated by how much access they had to resources, often seen in where their residences were located, or how they were buried upon death. As you might expect, the elites were distinguished by wealth, which they were entitled to primarily by inheritance, rank, or marriage. The elites tended to live near the city centres, which contained the temples, palaces, ball courts, and other public buildings, as well as the most desired and best protected residences. Craftspeople stayed close to the centre so that they could participate in market activity. Agricultural labourers lived in the countryside. Consensus on how large these populations were has varied considerably over the centuries. One recent estimate indicates that Tikal, one of the largest polities, had a total population of approximately 92,000. With 11,300 living in the city centre, just over 50,000 living on the periphery, and 30,000 in the surrounding rural areas. But further LiDAR studies could put this number considerably higher.
Please.
Maya trade existed on the local, regional, and long-distance levels. Diversity in the environment and in the culture, leading people to develop their own unique craft and product specializations, thus encouraging the growth of trade networks to distribute goods, resources, and services. Maya products that were traded over long distances, that is, to various neighboring portions of Central America, included agricultural products, basketry, dyes and pigments, condiments, pottery, and textiles. These are items that all of the Maya traded, but each had their own local characteristics. The lowlands specialized in cotton, chert, lime, salt, tobacco, cacao, opal, and jaguar pelts. The highlands specialized in grinding stones, obsidian, volcanic ash, cinnabar, jadeite, pyrite, and serpentine. The coastal areas, meanwhile, specialized in things like balsam, sugar, fish, shells, shark teeth, and tortoise shells. Although it is difficult to determine from the archaeological record alone, it appears that a merchant class had developed by the Classic period. Professional peddlers and itinerant traders. And no doubt, other members of society too engaged in trading activities on a part-time basis. As in the rest of the world, trade networks were not only a conduit for goods, but also for people and ideas. Towns, cities, and countryside areas were interlinked by elaborate causeways, known as Sac Bay, or White Roads. Ceremonial pathways, perhaps usually only traversed at night, lit up by the moon. Usually they would run for a few kilometers or less, but the largest yet found, running from the city of Coba in the Yucatan to neighboring Yaxuna, ran for some 60 miles. The explanation for such roads was often given to myth rather than history. Supposedly built by a magician king, Ez, who worked only at night, much like the Pyramid of the Magicians of Uxmal, said to have been thrown up by a dwarf wizard in a single night. For the world inhabited by the Mayans teetered ever on the precipice between terrestrial Earth and the divine. In 1525, victorious from his conquest of the Aztec Empire, Hernán Cortés moved south with an elite force of warriors. Just a few hundred men who brought down a civilization of millions. Trailed by a substantial force of native allies. The key to their success. And a great baggage train of horses and pack animals, heading south to Honduras to subdue rebellious underlings and seize new lands. Cortés and the officers dined lavishly on pork and beef, but most had to live off the land. En route, they stopped to resupply at one of the largest bodies of water in Guatemala, Lake Flores. Today, it's a party town, regional capital, and backpacker hotspot. But 500 years ago, here stood a great city of the Maya. Running along the lakeside, but mostly on an island just offshore. Its name was Tyasal. The inhabitants had little choice but to entertain these bizarre foreign guests. Once inside the city, it became clear that some members of the expedition would have to be left behind. Cortez's horse, Morcillo, veteran of countless battles, ever by his side since landing in Mexico 6 years earlier, could go on no longer. The prize Cordoba stallion had reached the end of his journey. Reluctant to kill his old friend, in a bout of uncharacteristic sentimentality, the dour conquistador asked his hosts if he could leave him in their care. Never having seen such a creature before, the citizens enthusiastically accepted. And when the Spaniards moved on, Morcillo was treated with the utmost respect. Fed on a diet reserved only for the highest echelons of society. Unfortunately for the horse, stranded in an alien world, that diet consisted entirely of turkeys and flowers. By the time Europeans again came this way, close to 100 years later in 1618, in the form of two Franciscan missionaries, Abueta and Funicelida, they found amidst the carved deities of the central plaza an unusual sight. Having all the features of a horse, yet depicted sitting on the ground with human-like
guys.
Quite alien to
I
equine.
hate this fucking game. I
Morcillo
love this game.
had become a god. They named him Jimin Chan, meaning tapir rain god. And it seems he'd become one of the primary deities of the city. Father Obita was so horrified that he destroyed the statue in his rage, very nearly being lynched on the spot had Funicelida not intervened. In 1622, another priest, Father Delgado, and his men were enthusiastically and joyfully accepted into the city, ushered ever onwards to the central plaza, where their hearts were torn out for all to see. Only in 1692 would the city finally be subdued, the last Maya kingdom to submit to conversion. By which time, we're told that the Itza overlords of the lake ruled with an iron grip, apparently killing any men who surpassed 50 in age, for fear of them becoming wizards. Desperate measures had to have been put in place for the place to have survived for as long as it did. Think of a Maya police state controlled by a hereditary priesthood. Following the fall of the city, the Spaniards spent 9 hours smashing idols. and in the Canex Palace they found many copies of sacred books, of prophecies and history. What became of them is unknown, with some arguing that this could have been the origins of the codices now found in Europe, at Dresden and in Paris. Though, in all likelihood, most, if not all, were probably destroyed. Though many, like the Lacandon Maya, escaped to the forest to live remote lives away from the invading Europeans, the last independent city had come to an end, and with it, perhaps the greatest of the post-classic kingdoms, that of the Itza, who'd once ruled far off Chichen Itza. But there was another great kingdom too. This one in the southern Guatemalan highlands. One which retained its pre-conquest traditions too, with roots stretching far back into the past. We know them as the Quiche, but unlike almost all other Mayan regions, some of their holy books survive to the present. Today, the Quiche number close to 1 million. They occupy most of the territory of their former kingdom still, and it is thanks to them that the Maya creation story remains alive, providing an unprecedented window into the pre-Columbian Mayan world. When the Spaniards first arrived in Quiche territory in 1524, led by the vicious warlord Alvarado the Cruel, they found themselves up against the most powerful state in the highlands. Following the fall of Chichen Itza some 500 years earlier, two successor states of sorts had arisen. Tributary powers ruling over their neighbours with an iron grip. All worshippers of the plumed serpent, a warrior god revered by many during those difficult days. In the north, Mayapan had been a great power in its own right. Though ultimately defeated by a coalition of its subjects in the middle of the 15th century, one of its ruling houses would go on to found Tayasal. The other kingdom in the south survived all the way up until the Spanish conquest. This is what Alvarado came up against in 1524. Aiming for a hammer blow right at the heart of Quiche power, at the capital of Utaclan, Alvarado, sword-clad, bedecked in steel armor, singled out one of the Maya commanders, Tecum Umam. Wearing little more than cloth, feathers, and carrying an obsidian blade. Engaging him in single combat, Tecum Umam was brutally slain in front of all of his warriors. After more vicious fighting, outgunned, overwhelmed, and awed by the Spanish weapons, the city fell, and Christianity arrived. And yet, relatively out of the way, without much notice by the authorities, the Quiche kept their secrets. Here, the old ways would survive. By 1701, when a local parish priest named Ximenes was inducted into the inner circle of the Quiche leadership, he was shown a remarkable book. A forward-thinking man with a profound respect for Maya culture, Ximenes translated the work into Spanish, from where it would gradually reach a wider audience. For hundreds of years, in times of uncertainty, the ruling families of the Highlands had consulted this book in order to make sense of the world, consisting of the wisdom of the ancestors. They knew it as the Council Book, or the Popol Vuh. According to legend, the work had been given to them on a pilgrimage down to the far-off Atlantic shore. Some called it the light that came from beside the sea, others the dawn of life, and some our place in the shadows. The work is intense, a heavy-going masterpiece of mythology, epic poem of over 9,000 lines. To rival the Iliad and the Rig Veda, it is generally considered the greatest surviving work of Mayan literature. Those who wrote down the version of the Popol Vuh we know today don't give us their personal names, referring to themselves simply as the Quiche people. But we do know that the work dates from the post-conquest period, created in secret using the alphabet of the conquerors. Like the other great Mayan book, a series of poetic prophecies known as the Chilin Balam, meaning jaguar priest, as well as the Rabanal Achi, one of the few Maya plays in existence, could not have been recorded without Latin. Likely written and composed by the great lords of the Quiche people. Like the work of St. Germanus of Auxerre in sub-Roman Britain, the Popol Vuh at times seems to describe pictures, perhaps murals and tapestries that once existed in the capital. One of the most interesting parts of the Popol Vuh is the version of the Maya creation myth it records.
Guys, I think I'm done. 1:30 a.m. I'm done, my friends. I'm done. I'm gonna raid Eric, I think. Raid Eric, the director. Thanks for being here. We couldn't do it. We couldn't do it tonight. We really wanted to, but we couldn't do it. We're gonna do it soon, though, guys. We're pacing. We're pacing. Every session we're having pacers. That's progress.
Experiment proved unsuccessful.
Thanks for being here, Dick, Stash,
The created
Toad,
beings
Christian.
destroyed.
Peace.
The chief protagonists of our story are the mythical hero twins, Hunahpu and Xiblanca. Said to be the first humans, and the sons of the maize god, Hunahpu. They are said to have visited the underworld, Xibalba, to challenge the gods of death in a series of deadly ball games, perhaps symbolically reenacted during the games in the ball courts of Maya cities. But despite the best machinations of Xibalba, again and again the hero twins emerge victorious. Finally, to escape the gods of death, having exhausted every other option, the twins sacrificed themselves by leaping into a pit of fire.